Hello friends and welcome to Vote. I'm your host, Dr. Malama. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the 7 steps to becoming rich, and today we're just going to be looking at the first step, paying yourself first. This principle has been there for a long time. Personally, I read this principle from Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Where he talked about, this is a book from Robert Kiyosaki, by the way, where he talked about paying yourself first and the importance of paying yourself first. He talked about how the rich and the poor think a little bit different, in the sense that the rich tend to pay themselves first, therefore they always have money for their investments and for their savings. And like the poor always pay themselves last after they have handled the bills, they have paid their taxes, they have paid their expenses, and then what remains is what they use to invest, which most of the times they have little to none. So the rich, on the other hand, they actually tend to pay themselves first. Therefore, because they're paying themselves first, they're actually going to do it to have enough money to budget and enough money to invest. Okay, so this rule, this principle really has been there for a long time. In fact, when you read the book The Richest Man in Babylon, this is one of the first thing he talked about. This is actually a book like written a long time ago. I know it is written in the Asian language, Dao, Shao, but it's really a nice book and I would recommend that you get to read it. Okay, so talking about paying yourself first, like why is this important that you pay yourself first? Right, so it gives you the ability to save and invest. Now, I know what you're thinking. How much should you pay yourself first? What percentage of your monthly income or weekly income should you actually put aside, and how should you do that? So that's what we're going to be getting into in this episode. Now that we've talked about the importance of actually paying yourself first, the question should be, how do you pay yourself first? Like, what are you using? Which metrics are you using? So from the Richest Man in Babylon, he actually advised that you actually, at least, you get 10% of your income, you put it aside, you pay yourself first, right? So let's just call this the 10% rule, right? We're going to use at least two rules, right? The 10% rule. So number one is the 10% rule. So this rule allows you to actually save at least 10%. You pay yourself, right? This is very important. You put that 10% and then you get to divide that 10% according to how you want it actually to work for you, right? Because the whole purpose of actually you paying yourself is that the money should be able to work hard for you instead of you working hard for your money, of which that's what most people do, right? Monthly, they just depend on that monthly salary coming in. Once it comes in, they pay their expenses and it's done, and the cycle repeats, like a year of not saving or saving very little money that you actually didn't even get to invest, right? It just sits in the bank and it is depreciating. So the 10% rule, this was advised from Akkad, who is like the richest man in Babylon. He actually advised to say 10% of this money you should be able to pay yourself, right? We have that rule. The second one, which is looking at the times we are in, for me, I would prefer this. This is more realistic, right? Like you pay yourself 20%, right? Like why I would prefer this, this gives you some margin, right? So the 20% rule will at least give you some margin for other things. So out of this 20%, you can actually get to divide this money, right? You can divide this money. You would say out of the 20%, we're going to do two things, right? 10% of this, which is half of it, 10% of this, we are going to put it under our emergency fund, right? And 10% we are going to do what? To invest and to save and invest. So the 10% should go for your emergency fund, right? And then the other 10% should go for savings and investing. If you look at this, we talked about emergency fund a little bit. The emergency fund, we are looking at things that come about that are out of our control, right? A funeral comes up, maybe you lose a parent. I think we've all had those things, the so-called rainy days, right? Where the unexpected happens, there is an accident in the family, there is money that will be needed, right? We don't have to start scrambling for money, asking for money. But if we had an emergency fund, of which should be set at least 3 to 6 months of of your expenses, this money should be able to cover you, right? Let's say if there is a funeral at home, if you are a parent, let's say your spouse dies, your children needs you to be around, right? You don't have to bury your spouse and at the moment you'll get back to work, because you can't afford to miss work. If you miss work, you're not going to provide for your children, right? I mean, that is important that you provide for your children, but it's also important that you are there for your children, right? So in this instance, if you have that emergency fund set up, you won't have to go back to work. The money would be there that it will be able to do it to help you in those tough situations, right? So 10% goes to the emergency fund. Then 10% is what you do, you save and you invest. And this is very important. Saving should never go alone, right? I'll repeat this as many times as I have to. Saving should never go alone. You should always save and invest, because the money you put in your bank, you just put it in the bank, it just doesn't work, right? Like, I know you save a penny a day, 65, you'll be a millionaire, but again, what's the purpose of you being a millionaire at 65 when you could have been one at 30 or at 40, right? Like, put this money into your savings, and you should be able to do it to invest that money. Okay, so now the question comes, okay, I have set up this rule and I'm going to do this, but the question again comes, how do I do this, right? Like, how do I get all this money that I'm having and put into these accounts? Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Now, this money here you are keeping is going to be there for a long time, 3 to 6 months. You're not going to be using it then. So what type of an account would you want to put it? Put it in a low risk account. That's one, because you don't want to lose it at the end of the day, right? You want it to be there, but you also want it to accumulate. So you want it to have some interest, right? So you put it in an account that is a little bit low risk, but it should be able to give you some returns. So, and it should also be able to be available when you need it, right? Because it's for an emergency. So that money should be, the liquid form should be able to be available when you need it, right? Which is a little bit different from the savings. So what you are saving and investing, you can actually put this into things like a mutual fund or hedge fund, right? You save this money, you put it in a mutual fund. A mutual fund is going to divide this money and put it into different, for example, if it is about stock, that mutual fund is actually about stocks, shares. So it's going to put this money into different companies, right? Like, it spreads the money across that. Even if you are to lose some from a different company, you will still have some on a different company, and they have higher returns than just putting into your traditional savings account. So this money tends to do what? To divide, to multiply, rather not divide, to multiply, and it actually grows bigger. Why are you even saving? There should be a why, right? And your why has to be big enough, isn't it? Like, okay, why are you saving? It could be that you want a new car, right? It could be that you want a home, or a bigger home if you already have a home, right? It could be that you want to travel. It could be for many reasons. So again, you can divide this, right? So some percentage would go for the car, some percentage would go for the house. So let's say, okay, the house is a big deal, right? And requires a lot of money. So we'll say from this 10%, 5% will actually go for the house. Then about 3% will go for your car, 2% will go for your travel, right? You know, I mean, you have to see the world at the end of the day. You are working, you should be able to see other countries, get exposure, right? So why is this important? Why are you doing this? It still answers the same question, right? You want to see how your money is moving. You want to know where your money is going. And you want to do things actually according to how you have planned it. So if you want to buy a car, and the 3% you've been putting in that account, and then let's say after 2-3 years, you're like, you know what, we need a car. Because most people on average, they tend to change their cars maybe after like 5 years, right? So after 5 years, you're like, okay, we need to buy a car. What type of a car do we want? Maybe your wife comes up and says, you should get a Range. I mean, why not? We've worked hard for 5 years, let's get a Range. So you go into the account and then you find to say the money that is there is not sufficient for you to buy a range. What are you going to do? Are you going to get the money from your travel, or are you going to get the money from the home? No, right? You say, oh, the money for the car that is there does not support us to buy a range, so we're not going to buy a range. And obviously, you are not going to get debt, right? Like, don't get debt on a car, for a car. Like, don't get debt so because you want to travel, right? Never get debt to improve your personal life. That's the rule, right? So that money that is in the car savings account, like if it's not enough for that car, you don't get to buy that car. If that money maybe supports you to buy a Lexus, supports you to buy a Mac X, that's what you get, because that's what the money is there. If not, wait a little bit, make that money for the range, and then you can get the range, or get a Benz, right? BMW. It will be up to you, but that money, we are saying it has to be something you planned for. So you're not doing anything out of impulse. Like, you planned for that, and that money has been there. You have stored it. It has divided. It has multiplied, rather. So you get to have that car. Then for your house, it's the same thing. The same thing applies. If the money is not sufficient enough for you to buy a big house, you don't get to go and start getting mortgage for your house that you're going to be staying in, right? You can get mortgage for a house that you're going to be renting. That's totally different, right? Yeah, and obviously the same thing applies for your travel. Once again, I'm your host, Dr. Malama, and thank you guys for sticking around up to this far. Obviously, I would really appreciate if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section, subscribe to the channel, and always share with a friend. As always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.